Good evening, how are you? Afternoon, welcome along. It is Inspire and Be Inspired, another opportunity for us to have some motivational conversations, and we throw in the occasional life hacks. Today, we are focusing firmly on all things music, all things Nottingham, as we have a revered guest who's going to be telling us all about the black soulful house scene, funk, soul, however you want to call it. This gentleman has definitely been there from day dot. Over the course of the last few months, I've been talking to many people in Birmingham, many people up and down the country, and the name Jonathan Woodliffe comes up again and again as being a very important and influential figure on the progression of the music scene in the UK. I'll take the opportunity to welcome you along. If you're watching live, feel free to leave any comments. You'll see now that the comments do come up on the stream, on the screen, and whenever there's a break in the conversation, I will direct my attention to you, so please let me know that you're there. The same goes for everyone watching the recording. Please do leave a comment. It does help, and we're doing our very best to get in front of as many people as possible. So without further ado, let me welcome along my guest today, Mr. Jonathan Woodliffe. Good afternoon, my friend. All the way.
Good afternoon, Andy. How are you?
The UK. I'm incredible. I'm really, really good. I'm very, very happy to see you. I'll say at the beginning of every stream, I'm happy that everything is working fine. And I'm looking forward to delving a little deeper and getting to know yourself. So let me give you a bit of a backstory. You will have heard my introduction there. Over 12 months or so now, I've been primarily, I started off with my talks that we were calling Brum as Fuck. I wanted to focus on the birth of the house music scene in Birmingham, seeing as I was around myself to remember it. But I knew there was a lot more to the birth of the scene than I was aware of, seeing as I never started DJing until a few years after house had exploded. And of course, we started talking about the Powerhouse Ordea in Birmingham. We started talking about the Ordea scene up and down the country. And I began talking to legends from that scene. And time again, your name came up. And it was many years after the fact that I'd be aware I would have been in Birmingham dancing to yourself as one of the key DJs at the legendary Powerhouse Ordeas. So I'd like to find out your backstory and understand how you became a legend on the UK scene. I think that's something that we can easily do over the course of the next hour or so, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it'd be good to chat.
Good. So, as I did say, throughout the course of the evening, I'll do my very best to address people who are watching us live. Cliff Williams jumps in already, and he says, "Hi, Jonathan. I hope you're well. I miss the days of buying tunes from you and all those drives up to Hardwick Hall Hotel." That's Mr. Cliff Williams saying hello.
Hi, Cliff.
Slowly but surely, we do get more people joining us. Feel free to share this stream, guys. Feel free to drop us a like. Let us know you're there. So, John, tell us, where does it all begin for you? Roughly where you were, when and where you were born, and your earliest memories, really, of life in the UK around then.
Right. Well, born and bred in Nottingham. Mm-hmm. Went to school in Gedling. Grew up. Always listened to the radio. Never really liked pop music, listened to it, but it didn't hold anything for me. When I was probably about 16, managed to sneak out and do the normal Palais kind of clubs, and they were all right, but I didn't really like what was played. And some friends of mine at school who were a year older than me were into Northern Soul. I didn't know what it was. I'd listen to them and think, this sounds interesting. And then one Friday night, a very green behind the ears, Jonathan Woodliffe, was taken down to the Brit Club on Trent Bridge, which that was a Northern Soul night down there. This would be probably sometime in late 75, maybe early 76, I guess.
Okay, and you would have been how old then, more or less?
16, 17 at the time.
Right.
Went down with them, walked into this club, and it just blew me away with the music, hearing, great 60s records. And I just got into the lyrics and the sound of the music and the atmosphere. And it was, people were there for the music. They weren't there to get drunk and pull women or women pull blokes. That wasn't what it was about.
Right. And, so let me stop you before we go any further then. Give us a brief insight into a very, very brief insight into family life for yourself. So was music a big part of your household? Do you have older brothers and sisters who you would have taken influences on music from them?
No. Well, the younger brother, yes. Simon's 3 years younger than me. He ended up going to Northern Soul gigs with me towards the latter end of my time on that, DJing on that scene. Mum and Dad, yes, were into music, but not what I liked. Mm-hmm. So it was really listening to the radio. Okay. But yeah, I got the bug, and then you didn't hear those records on the radio, so it was like every weekend where possible, I'd try and get out.
Mm-hmm. And were you purchasing records in those early days?
Oh, in those early days, yeah, straight away. As soon as I got hooked, it was like a burning fire inside to know what these records were and then go out and buy them. So, I never went to Select-A-Disc when it was on Arkwright Street in Nottingham. That was the first place they had the shop, but they moved. Well, I say I never went. I think I went once. Down the stairs at Arkwright Street, but then they opened the shop on Bridlesmith Gate, and then upstairs they would have some Northern Soul originals, some reissues that had come out on bootlegs, so that I would go there to see what I could get, and then as soon as I was old enough to get a part-time job, because I stayed on at school in sixth form, I got a part-time job in a supermarket every night in the week, and any times I'd got lessons off, I'd go to the supermarket and work, and that money would fuel my obsession that started then for buying records. And every weekend I would go out, buy records, and then a guy that I met within a few months of going down to the Brit, Andy Lee, who's sadly no longer with us, we became really good friends, and we used to meet up, because on a Monday night at the Palais, upstairs was like a kids' disco, downstairs was Northern Soul, and you had to be over 18 to get in. That time was, I think, probably just 17, and managed to get downstairs into the room. Andy and I would... Well, Andy would take me in his car to all-nighters all over the country, most weekends. And my money, every single penny I had from working at the supermarket, would go on buying records. So we'd go to all-nighters, and I'd just listen to the DJs, buy records, and the collection started building from there. We used to go down on a Monday night to the Ballet High, to this Northern Soul night, and... Andy and I would lend the DJ who was there our records. Andy was a few years older than me. He was at college, and he'd get a grant every term. So all that money that he got for his grant would be spent on records, and then through the term he would sell them off to live, because he lived, with his father. And where, I got that job, so I didn't have to sell things. I was just buying more and more and more. And then the lad who was DJing down there, I forget his name now, somebody will probably message it in a minute, he ended up going in hospital, and he was really ill, and Andy got the job. Mick Knight, who a lot of people will know that name, who was a manager at the Palais and part of the furniture down there, he asked Andy if Andy would DJ on the Monday night. So it was Andy DJing and borrowing my records. And some of my friends who went down, who took me to the Brit originally, said, "Jonathan, you're coming down here with your records. Why don't you DJ?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not really bothered." And they badgered me. So one night I said, "All right, I'll go and play some records." Well, it was the most nerve-wracking thing I'd ever done, to stand in the DJ console with my box of records and a microphone, because you'd introduce every record, which I'd never done before, and, play for half an hour, 45 minutes. But that was another big adrenaline rush. And straight away I was like, after a couple of weeks, I was like, I've got the measure of this, I can do it. And that's where my, the first experience of DJing came from doing those Monday nights.
The blueprint was set. I just want to say, Paulette Thompson, a fellow Nottingham person, says, "Hi, yes. Jonathan, lovely to see you, an early influencer for me and many of us. Lovely to see you, my dear."
Hi, Paulette.
And a gentleman who's just like the stream says, "Hi, guys. Recognise the name. Can't really put a handle on it. Neil Rushton, ring any bells?"
Yes, I know, Neil. Of course we do.
How are you, brother? Good to see you, man. Pleasure. It's an honour, as always, and we'll get you back on very soon. Okay, so those early days then, 17 years of age in the Palais, spinning the tunes. And Trix says hello as well. So, yeah.
Right.
I'll just sit here and let you continue to tell the timeline.
Right, okay. So,
progresses.
As time went on, we continued with this, with doing Monday nights. Andy, at some point within probably about 9 months of us doing it, had a fallout with Mick Knight, the manager, and then I was fortunate that he asked me if I wanted to do Monday nights the whole night. So, the opportunity arose. I tried to persuade Mick not to get rid of Andy, but obviously his mind was made up, and I got the job of doing this on a Monday night, and numbers were good, and it enabled me then with doing it on a Monday night where I would run coaches at the weekend to various all-nighters or all-dayers. So we started doing coaches from Nottingham to Wigan Casino and to Cleethorpes. So I had a situation where I had a captive audience there on a Monday night. I would announce that a coach was leaving if it was going to Wigan on Friday night to the oldest night, it would leave the Brit, or it'd be if it was leaving on a Saturday night to go to Wigan or Saturday night to Cleethorpes, everybody'd meet outside the Salutation Inn on Maid Marian Way. The coach would be there, and most weekends it was the same coach driver, so he knew everybody on the coach, and off we went. Fortunate for me, it was a vehicle that enabled me to make a little bit of money out of the coach, and that was just ploughed straight back into records. So, this continued for quite a few years, really. I'm trying to think when I stopped doing the Palais on a Monday night. It would probably be late 79, maybe, that I stopped doing that because, I made a conscious decision. I have to switch around a bit here because at the same time, the lines are a little bit blurred, because when we were going to all-dayers, you had a situation then where, the main room at these all-dayers was Northern Soul, but through the mid to late 70s, but the secondary rooms were jazz funk rooms. So, I would do the set in the Northern room, And then, I would also go and listen to the music in the jazz funk room. And where I used to go and buy records in the mid to late 70s, which was Kev Roberts' business called Record Haven in Nottingham. He had a small office in the top floor of Regency Street in Nottingham. I'd go up there to buy Northern Soul records, but also he would have new releases from America. So he would have new 12s. And because I was interested in that music that was getting played in the room, I started buying 12s at the same time as I was buying Northern Soul records. So all those, what we call as jazz funk records that were coming through on 12s. For the first lot of 12s, the early Soul 12s, Kev had those as new releases, and I'd pick a bunch up because he'd bring them back. And that was the first time that I bumped into Colin and was able to have a conversation with him. Was when I'd gone up to Record Haven one Saturday, and I think Colin and one of his brothers had come down to pick some records up off Kev. And, this must have been probably 76, I guess, because I've still got the part-time job. And I got introduced to Colin. I'd previously spoke to Colin once when I went to the Mecca.
So we're talking clearly Colin Curtis. Just want to
yes,
clarify that for anyone who may not be aware. Carry on.
Yes. So so I got that was the first time I'd bumped into Colin, not trying to talk to him over a DJ console at the Mecca, and getting very little thrift out of him. So that's the first time we met. And I'd see him on a regular basis most weekends because of doing the all-dayers. If I was doing a coach trip to an all-dayer, especially if it was in Birmingham, inevitably Colin would be doing the jazz funk room. I may or may not be DJing in the northern room, in the main room. So, I'd see Colin there. And likewise at the Palais, which everybody from Nottingham, will know, and certainly most people from the Midlands will know, that there was all-dayers started at the Palais very early on, where the first all-dayers were obviously all Northern Soul, all upstairs. And then with the emergence of the jazz funk scene, that was what was played in the Ballet High downstairs. So Northern Soul upstairs, Ballet High downstairs was the jazz funk room. And, I'd see that all-dayer was on once a month. So, I'd get to see Colin couple of times a month, I guess, minimum. But I was working on, I was then playing Northern Soul records. Colin had, moved away from, what he was playing at the Mecca when I first went up there, which was, Northern and, some new release singles. He'd moved on again and was obviously 12s and albums playing, what we now know as jazz funk. And, I was hooked on that music as well at the same time. So, I was buying Northern Soul records on one hand and buying jazz funk new releases with the other hand. So it was just getting completely out of control, my buying of records. But, I had the money to do it. And, it just fueled the fire, so to speak. And then, as time went on, we're getting now looking at late 79, early 80, we see that change where the jazz funk scene was getting bigger and bigger, and the northern scene was, it was still big in some areas, but not, in Nottingham, it got to the point where they were switching the rooms round. So Northern Soul was then downstairs, and jazz funk was the thing that was upstairs. Well, it was just as that change came, Colin always remembers the day I went down to him, and I was there was quite a lot of politics on the northern scene, which all I wanted to do was go and play records. I didn't want to get into that, well, if you work for this promoter, you can't work for that promoter. I was like, I just want to play the records, mate.
Still happens.
You know, I can't be... Well, I know. And I was just like, yeah, I just got to the point where I just had enough of it. And I just like, I said to Colin, I said, I'm stopping playing Northern Soul records. I'm selling up. And, you know, I remember going up to Wigan. This would be probably February, March time, 1980. Opened up my record box. And one of my record boxes took 500 records up with me, opened up this box and said, they're for sale, and started selling. And it was with a view to fueling a trip to go to the States. So my first record buying trip to America was June 1980. Wow. So I went over with a good friend of mine, still to this day, Dave Raystrick, who lives in Skegness. And, you know, we decided, we went to the airport, and then Dave went, where do you want to go? So it's like a kid in a sweet shop. I was like, what do you mean, where do you want to go? So I just said, well, let's go to Los Angeles, because a lot of people that were going to the States looking for records would go down the eastern seaboard, whether they're going to Miami or New York, and then they'd go to Philly or Chicago or Detroit. And I said, well, let's go all the way across, because surely there's going to be places over there that other English dealers haven't gone to. So off we went, and, you know, I think the air flight was about, I don't know, £500-600, which in 1980 was a fortune.
Astronomical.
It was. I had to sell a lot of records out of that record box to do it. And, yeah, we got the money together and off we went. And that was the first trip to the States to buy, well, it was primarily to buy Northern Soul records, but it was, you know, and I also bought some 12s and albums as well. You know, and I came back and, you know, sold the rest of my Northern Soul collection. And then that autumn, I got offered a residency in Nottingham, because then, you know, I came back and I was just playing jazz funk records at the Palais at Nottingham. You know,
and was there a huge buzz at this time? Being completely honest, was there a huge buzz around your name? Were you the man who had the tunes?
Well, not really, no, because there were other people before me in Nottingham that were already playing those 12s. You know, Kev Thomas from Arcade Records, my boss when I worked at the store, he'd already got his store in Nottingham. He was working on the radio. He did a radio show, and he was doing the Palais on a Sunday night when there wasn't an all-dayer on. He did, you know, jazz funk in the Ballet High, because I used to go down. There was another guy called Mick Fields in Nottingham who used to do the Italian club on a Thursday night. Mick took me up to the Mecca the very first time I went up. I went up in Mick Fields' car. So there were other people that were already playing those records, as was Andy Lee as well. So, you know, there was already the beginning of a scene in Nottingham that people had already got involved with it. So, you know, I was aware of what was going on. I was aware of who was DJing, but wasn't part of that team because I was the last one to leave that Northern Soul ship. and, you know, as people said to me, oh, you're going over to the dark side. That was a saying that was prevalent at the time. So, you know, I managed to get on the all-dayers doing in the main room upstairs playing jazz funk. I'd already done the all-dayers as a Northern Soul DJ. And some of the early all-dayers, we had Roy Ayres on there at the Palais, you know, I think 79, 1980 or 81, around that time. I've got the dates locked away somewhere, where Lonnie Liston Smith was there as well. And those all dayers just exploded.
Do you have
Absolutely
a lot of original?
exploded.
Do you have a lot of original memorabilia from those times?
No, just bits and bobs, just odd posters. Really, that's all it is. I mean, you know, nowadays you go to a gig and within 30 seconds of walking through the door, everybody knows where you are because of phones. You know, where back then very few people had cameras. I certainly didn't have a camera. You know, I bought records and DJ. You know, I wish with hindsight we'd all got cameras with us because, you know, very little was captured. There's a handful of people, you know. We ask from time to time, has anybody got any pictures from the old days at that time? And there's very few go up. I think somewhere on YouTube you'll see stills taken from various all dayers, as you would do from Birmingham, from Rock City, from Belinda's at Leeds, some of the all dayers at Sheffield, Clouds at Preston, obviously. Neil's all dayers that he did at Blackpool, the all dayers at the Ritz. So there is photographs around, but there's not loads of them, unfortunately, because people just didn't take cameras with them.
No,
you know, they were out on that dance floor.
I've got to stop asking questions and just listen to what you're saying. So you were telling us.
No, because I'll just waffle on.
Carry on. We've got all night. Hi to Mark. Thank you for your comment. Mark Goddard says he's been looking forward to this. Nice to have you, my friend. Okay, John. 80, 81. Continue.
Yeah, 80, 81. So, you know, I was doing these all dayers, and there was a shop in Nottingham, a real cool clothing shop called Limey's, and Greg, the manager there, knew the owner of a club in Nottingham called Camelot. And he said to me one day, he said, there's a vacancy for a resident DJ in this club. Would you be interested? And I was like, I don't know. So, you know, I went down, saw the club. It was a small club, underground. You had to go stairs down to it, only a small main room. And I thought, yeah, this would be fun to do. But I had to do sort of 5 nights a week. And the strangest thing was, this club, on a Monday night, it was the busiest night of the week. But they had all the footballers would come down because there'd be a dining room in the club as well. It was split over multiple levels. So you had a lot of, you know, a real mix of celebrities in there, and just cool people. So I started pushing the boundaries with the music that was, you know, before it was very much rather obvious records were getting played. So I pushed the boundaries on the Monday night because I knew I could, because every Monday night it was packed to the gunnels. It was 1 in, 1 out. So I had an audience that I could channel this music that they didn't know. And the more I gave them, the more they were into it, because they just kept coming up and going, we don't hear these records anywhere else in any other clubs in Nottingham. You know, people started asking me for tapes and stuff. And, you know, it was like, it was a great feeling because I'd got a club that I could do this in, you know, in the city centre. But the other nights through the week were more, had to be more commercial. I couldn't play that level of music every night of the week in there. I just knew the limitations. So it was a stepping stone. I had some great nights down there. You know, there was great people who used to go to the club, a real mixture. You know, Forest at that time was still a big team, so Peter Shilton would be regularly down there in the restaurant at night. You know, all the cool people in Nottingham would be there, and, you know, they were into the music, which was great. And without me realising, you know, it would be sometime in sort of like, I guess, late 81, early 82, I got introduced to a guy who used to come down every Monday night. He came up to me, Paul Mason, and said, look, you know, I'm the manager at Rock City. The club's going to have a refit. You know, at the moment, you're probably aware we have live bands on. We do a futurist night on a Saturday night. You know, we're looking for a resident DJ. You know, we're having this refit. We're going to change the club. Would it be something you'd be interested in? And I thought, well, you know, the band nights when they had bands on, which was normally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, you know, what was played by the DJ would reflect what band was on. And it was right across the board, bands playing. So when rock bands were on, Dave Brett from Way Ahead Records would DJ. If it was anything that was in my remit at that time, I'd play. So I think that the first few gigs I did there, when we finally the club, I started working in the club in, I think it was refitted in 82. So I would have started there. I think I left Camelot's sort of like February, March time, 82. I saw the club refitted and then went to work at Rock City. And the first nights that we had on where I DJ'd with bands being on, I think was Kid Corral and the Coconuts, Level 42, and there was, I forget what the other band was that I did at the time. So I would play before those bands went on and afterwards, because that's how Rock City worked in the week. And then at the weekends, Paul wanted to do a student night on a Thursday night. Friday night, he wanted to do something, because there was a club in Derby called the Blue Note, which was a really cool small club. Colin used to do a night down there on a Sunday night at the Blue Note. We used to go over, you know, there'd be a group of us from Nottingham that would go over on a Sunday. If we hadn't gone to another all-dayer, we would go to the Blue Note at Derby on a Sunday night, meet up with people we knew in Derby, and Colin was there. And it was always a cool club, but the rest of the time there was a DJ, a resident DJ, and he played really cutting-edge, sort of like what was early electronic music. So it was a mixture of those UK electronic bands and some of the music that was coming out of America. So early Madonna singles with like Depeche Mode, you know. So it was like, it wasn't a futurist night, it wasn't a jazz funk night, it was just a cool mixture. And that's what Paul wanted to do on the Friday nights. And I kind of had my reservations on it, because I'd already managed to talk Paul and the operations director to let us do jazz funk all-dayers, which at that time, it was that transition period. It was more like a funk and soul all-dayer then, rather than, because that time period where it was that music changed. And so we started doing the all-dayers on a Sunday once a month, and they just took off, like exploded. You know, the club holds 1,700 people. You know, there was, I had, Colin DJing, Trevor M DJing, Sean Williams came over from Birmingham, played. We had downstairs.
Were you in charge of the lineups?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I would pick the DJs that I wanted to, that, there was a circuit that we all played on, and that, there was also, DJs from Nottingham, Simon Baseline Smith from Derby. There was also Edgar and Calvin from Nottingham. So, there was a pool of people that we had as DJs. We brought Steve Allen up from Peterborough. And we had a pool of DJs that were very similar pool to what was at the Powerhouse in Birmingham, that, I would put on and away these all days went. The Friday night, however, for that first autumn of '82, it never really took off. The club was 1,700 capacity. You know, there was about 250, 300 people downstairs capacity. So upstairs was 16, you know, sort of 1,500 people. So you can imagine a room with capacity of 1,500 people. And we were getting about 250, 300 people, maybe 350 people. And I was like, Paul, this isn't working. You know, if it was a smaller club, it'd be working. And I was begging him to do what we did on a Sunday every Friday night. So after much deliberation, he finally submitted to letting me choose what was going to be played on a Friday night, instead of, not that I couldn't choose before, but he wanted a certain thing doing, and like I was like, this isn't going to work, but you know, you're the boss, I'll go with it, kind of thing. And then just after that Christmas, beginning of '83, Paul let me do what I wanted to do with the Friday night, and within 2 months, it had gone from 300-400 people to 1,500 people every Friday night. It was word of mouth, and it was just, it took off like, you know, it was just like, I stood there on Friday night and I was just like gobsmacked to see the number of people turning up week after week. It was just unbelievable. And there was no old records played. It was new records. And how I programmed the night was, as soon as doors opened, I would play the newest possible records that I'd got that I wanted to make big records as they were coming in. And then, because the club had a brilliant sound system and the lighting rig was phenomenal, we had a laser, a single head laser that would run across the room, a lighting rig and a really good sound system, and 2 video walls. You know, I had all this technology at my disposal as well. So we worked out ahead of time, we'd work out as a certain record that we would use at a certain time would start the night. Right. So in other words, you know, as people were coming in, they were hearing new records that they didn't know. Some did, some didn't. And then whatever was the biggest record at that all day last Sunday or the Friday before would be the record that would ignite the night. So we'd hold back on lighting effects, smoke, the laser, and then we'd pick that particular record and that would ignite the night. And it was like touch paper and a match. It was just like that, bang, and then off we went.
It's so gorgeous to listen to. So mate, you can just picture it.
As Paul will tell you, yeah, it was just like, you know, the buzz that I'd get from that night. You know, at the end of the night, I'd be like up for like an hour and a half afterwards, because I was just on a high from playing that music, and the atmosphere coming back off that dance floor was phenomenal. You know, and it was, you know, it wasn't just, you know, the whole of Nottingham was there, but, you know, we regularly had people travel from Leicester, Derby, Birmingham, Huddersfield, Leeds, Bradford, Sheffield, and, you know, word got out, and we were regularly getting people coming up from London. You know, years after talking to people, when I was working in the record store, Andy, who used to work at Greyhound Records, said, yeah, I used to come up and watch you play at Rock City. There'd be a load of us come up. Norman J used to come up. I didn't know any of these people. They just come up to have a look, and, you know, you're just head down working in that DJ console. You know,
let me just put a pin in that for a very quick second. You may be surprised to hear that Paulette says she has no words, but she does have loads of photos from Rock City. So maybe it's worth you having a conversation.
Yeah, it's time for Paulette to reveal.
We've got another legend, Yogi Horton, saying, didn't Jonathan Woodliffe. See, you put the C.
Yeah, I told you to do it.
You put that in my head. Didn't you once own Frank Wilson, Do I Love You? Yogi says.
Yes, that is correct, Yogi. You're right. That's we'll have to turn back the hands of time for this story then. So yeah.
Before you go there, excuse me, forgive me. I just want to say again, we're deep in conversation here with a true legend. Got lots of great guys with us listening, watching, commenting. Thank you to Jeremy, to Pete, to Rob Oxley, or Conversation of the Manor Born. So Dave Furs, also local guy in Stoke, Stafford back in the day. So as you can see, guys, every time you comment, your comments do come up on the screen. I can see them, but I don't want to interrupt Jonathan while he's talking. So please understand, anything that you say, it's mentally noted. I can read it on the stream, and I will come back and address it at some point.
Interrupt me and
No.
Give people the props, please.
This is not
without
for
them,
me.
Andy. Without them, without your audience, you're nobody. You have to have an audience in the first place. So all these people are taking time to comment. I do appreciate, and thank you very much for taking the time and getting involved.
That's why I do want to every now and again give them a shout out. So
absolutely.
So I'm going to say final shouts to Lee Wright and to Chris Lloyd, guys who would have been there back in the day.
Absolutely, 100%.
We're going to get to their era. We're going to get to the era shortly. So tell us.
Right, Frank Wilson. Here's the story. So, a guy who used to live in the UK moved over to Los Angeles, Simon Susan, and he was a bit of a demon for finding records. So the story goes that he went to a party in Los Angeles, met somebody at this party who worked at Motown Records and worked in the department where all the records, all their test pressings were filed. Because apparently Motown Records had, a room where one copy or multiple copies of all their records were filed away. So he managed to get, sweet talk this guy, managed to get in and acquired, shall we use this word, some records, one of them being Frank Wilson. So little did anybody know then what was about to unfold. So he got this record, was like absolutely brilliant. So what he did is he cut some acetates of the record, kept the title, but changed the artist. So he'd sent these acetates over. It didn't say Frank Wilson, Do I Love You, Indeed I Do. It said Eddie Foster, Do I Love You, Indeed I Do. And the B-side, Sweeter as the Days Go By, for some reason he speeded that up, so it was a little bit faster. That wasn't the side that was played, it was the other side. So this was played, a handful of DJs in this country had these acetates. It was played at Wigan, became a very big record. Nobody knew what it was. He then pressed them on a label that did exist, that did have an Eddie Foster record on it. So it was pressed up as on In Records as Eddie Foster, Do I Love You, Indeed I Do. And then at some point, the cat got out the bag and people then found out that it was actually a Motown, an unreleased Motown. It did have labels on it. It was a promo, but it was never sent out. They did some tests on this record, and Barry Gordy, for whatever reason, decided not to release that record. So it was filed away in the vaults forever and a day. And so a friend of mine who I was working for, this was just before I started working at Camelot, when I was out DJing every weekend. I left the supermarket where I was working and worked in a small record store that just sold Northern Soul records, Colony Records, which was owned by Les McCutcheon and Kev Roberts. And Les had gone to the States, come back he bought this copy of Frank Wilson off Simon Susan. Les had lent it to Russ Winstanley to play. And I said to Les, do you want to sell that record? And he said, yeah, I probably would sell it. So we agreed a price. He got that back off Russ. And then I bought it off Les. It was quite a substantial amount of money at that time. So it was done. Well, I paid him so much a month over, I think, 3 or 4 months. 4, maybe 5 months. That was the agreement we did. The figure was £500. The year was probably late 78, maybe. So that, yet again, is like that Freddie Laker flight, a lot of money. I think the most anybody paid for a Northern single at that time was maybe £200. So, you know, it was something I wanted because I did like the record. I didn't know how rare it was going to say. A lot of people were like, what you bought that for? You know, that's bound to turn up. Well, years later, as far as I know, there is only 2 known copies. That one that I had, which is, I sold, I didn't sell it. I swapped it for new release albums and 12s to the value of £500 with Kev. He then sold it in a deal to Tim Brown. So Tim still got that. And then Tim's contact in Canada managed to track down a guy who worked in the pressing plant in Detroit that actually pressed these records for Motown. And he used to take them home and test them before they were sent to Barry Gordy. And he happened to have one in his collection. So that was copy number 2. And since then, they're the only 2 copies that have ever been found.
Stuff for legends.
Just let me show you something, because this is quite funny.
Stop asking questions, Yogi. We'll be here all night.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. I've got nothing to do. My brother took a photograph of it at the time. And when I was going to Northern Soul dues and playing it, people would come up and want to have a photograph of it. I was just like, all right, yeah, whatever. Because it had got to that status. So my brother, years later, got this photograph out and had it transposed on a cushion. Said cushion. Bizarre.
Amazing.
So there you go.
Neil Rushton,
that's the story of that record.
Neil is saying the second copy was put in my hand by Ron Murphy, who was mastering the early Techno 12s.
That's right. I couldn't remember the name, Neil. Thank you very much. Yeah. There's always somebody who's got a better memory than you have when you start talking.
And
thanks, Neil.
Yogi says a test pressing turned up 150k it sold 4 years ago. Madness.
Records are only worth what somebody's prepared to pay.
Prepared to pay for them. Okay, so I'm not interrupting again. We need this timeline because we've still got some way to go.
Yeah.
83, 84.
Yeah, we've got a bit to go. So you're
smashing Fridays. Smashing Friday
nights. Once a month we do the all-dayers. We'd bring in, there was a pool of we decided that we'd also put PAs on. So we had Jocelyn Brown, Kenny Burke, we'd have various UK artists doing PAs. And we also had live bands. So we had Cameo play. We had Womack and Womack play. We had Houdini. We did the Def Jam tour where we had Alison Williams, Tashan, LL Cool J, Public Enemy, all on one day, and the tickets were like £5.50.
I was at a few of those, and I cannot remember a single thing. I cannot remember a single thing about Rock City. It annoys the hell out of me. It's mental. It's mental.
Were you one of those lads from Birmingham that spent too much time at the bar?
Yes. No, I was chasing the girls around, listening to all my friends.
I didn't want to say that, Andy, but there you go. Possibly, yes. So, these all-dayers, were just... I suppose you look back now, I have a handful of pictures of them. I have some amazing memories, and I really wish that at the time, we took more photographs. I've got the odd recording of me DJing. I've got 2 C90 tapes of the very first oldies night we did at Rock City, which was about 84 or 85, where we played all the records that were played on the jazz funk scene. But, normally on a Friday night, there was no old records played. There was too many new records coming out. It was about the new records that were coming from America and some things from this country as well. We were looking forward, driving this scene. And, there were, the people I met that travelled from all over the country that came religiously on Friday night and Sundays. I cannot thank them enough, because without those people, I'd be just a regular guy with a few records playing to an empty room. So, all of you who went there, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for coming, because you made the night, not me. It was you coming down, dancing to those records that made the night, not me.
I'm sure they'll be screaming at their screens saying, "Are you crazy, John? You shaped our lives. You actually were the foundation."
Well, there had to be, but they were the ones that decided to make the effort and come along on the journey. Mm-hmm. They came to me, I was, having that audience in front of me, then it enabled me to deliver those records that I was so passionate about. And the other thing that was a great advantage was I had access to the club. So I could go into the club on a night when the club wasn't open, fire up the sound system and play new releases and go in the middle of the dance floor and listen to them. So I had that added advantage where I understood what records sounded like in the middle of that dance floor. And having that ability to hear records over a big system, you play them at home or you play them in a studio, you hear something, you put it over a big system, and then you hear the depth of a record and how it's been put together in America. And suddenly you've got that advantage where, you can mess about with it. You can trim the bass down or add a bit to it because you've listened to it on a good system. Unfortunately, not every all-day we went to, the venues had brilliant sound systems. Rock City did, the Powerhouse did. When we used to go to the all-days at the Locarno, they had a good sound system in, but when the Locarno was refurbed and renamed, they also had a sound system to match or equal what we had at Rock City.
Again, zero recollection of any times being in there, and I was there a lot. It's insane. And as I'm sitting listening to you, I have these emotions. I feel it is like a movie. It's like I'm watching a movie, listening to you tell this. I can see you in the middle of the dance floor, listening to the sound, feeling that it's so romantic.
Yeah, I mean,
the way
it's like it was just, I was just fortunate that I was able to do that, because that gave me the edge. I could listen to records completely differently than what you would. You go in a shop and you hear something, then you take it home and play it and you think, yeah, that's all right, or that's better than what I thought it was. And then the next step is going to a club and playing it and see if it's as good to the audience as it was for you when you heard it. Well, I'd already done that because I'd gone and played them. And, all the way through, we were, Colin and I would talk at least 2 or 3 times a week on the phone. Right, what have you bought? Because Colin would go to Spinning in Manchester. I'd go to Arcade Records in Nottingham. We both get slightly different things, because Spinning would at that time be buying records direct from the States. They'd have a shipment come in every Saturday morning. Colin would go up there religiously and sometimes in the week, but Colin would also go elsewhere hunting for records. I would do Arcade Records. There'd be a few shops that I could call upon over the phone and have things, ordered up. But the working relationship I had at that time with Arcade Records, with Kevin Paul in there, where if I was after something, they would go out of their way to try and locate this record. And to be fair, Greyhound Records in London they always had brilliant buyers who would chance their arm and bring things in. And there was occasions where, Greyhound Records had order a record in, and they may have 3 or 4 copies of something, because they weren't sure whether it was going to happen over here. And especially when music started to change style-wise in America, they'd bring something in and they might just like, well, I have 4 copies of that. One would go to Arcade Records, where the other 3 went, I don't know. And, if I picked that record up, and it did on quite a few occasions, and Colin the same, we picked things up, and there were small labels and they disappeared, so it might be 2 or 3 weeks before anybody would get copies. So the other DJs couldn't find these records, because we were fortunate that we're first in the shop, got the records. We were the ones that, thought, right, we're going to go with this. And, there were certain things that were, impossible. I mean, I remember going down to an all-nighter at the Palais. This would be, you'd have to have a look at the record, because, I remember doing this all night. It was reggae upstairs. It was funk and soul downstairs. It was the end of jazz funk, the beginning of funk and soul. So, and it was May's Twilight was the record. So I was down there. Sean Williams was on. I forget who else was on. And I played Twilight for the first time. And the place went off it. And Sean was like, I need this record. I said, it's not for sale. You can go and find one. Because, as soon as that riff came in, the place went up. That was it. It was away. And,
do you have any
it's
tales?
Being a demon, Sean also found things that, Colin and I couldn't find. So, you have to do the hunting to get the tunes. In this day and age, it's completely different. It's made a lot easier. It's
a long since forgotten art, and it's so easy to forget how and why people earn their stripes. Quick question: do you ever recall forcing a record upon your crowd and making them love it? You'd hear the legendary Levan playing records time after time after time that people didn't like.
I wouldn't. You see, on a Friday night, I found that by playing records as they were coming into the club, they'd be listening, but, a few people would be on the dance floor. A lot of people would be standing around talking, taking in the music. So, you know, I did play things twice. Very rarely would I play anything 3 times. I didn't do I didn't know that Larry the Band did that until after. You know, when, you know, I started talking to people at that time, we were unaware of what was going on in New York. You know, I mean, I remember, just sidetracking slightly, I went over to New York in '86 to the music seminar, the new music seminar, which was run by Tom Silverman from Tommy Boy Records. And, you know, at that time, Rock City, I think it was '86. It might have been '84. I'd have to delve back and have a look at my pass. That everybody had a pass who registered to get in the clubs. So, you know, I went over to that and went digging for 12s all over the place, literally all over the place. And I was staying in Greenwich Village in a hotel on Lexington Avenue, and I went over with all the lads from Island Records, and you know, we all caught the plane together. They sorted me the hotel room out, and then we all kind of did different things because they got to go to Island Records and meet up with people, and you know, they got a stretch limo laid on from Island Records to take them over Brooklyn Bridge into New York, and I was just like, you know, they've got a WBLS radio on, and I was like, you know, I was like a, you know, kid in a sweet shop there. And off we drove up to Lexington Avenue into this hotel. I forget what the hotel was called now. But on the way in, they were advertising this night that was on at the Fun House in New York. And it was like the guy, I think it was Tiny's birthday party. And they'd got, I think they'd got like UTFO were on, and a few other hip hop acts. And I was like, I want to go to this. I'm going to this. So there was a number to ring. So I rang that number and I said, look, you know, I'm over here for the music seminar. You know, I work at this club in Nottingham. We had UTFO on like 2 months before, on one Sunday all day. So I said, look, I know these guys. I've had them on at my club. They went, all right, just come down. We'll put you on the guest list. So I was like, blagged it. So I turn up at the Fun House. There is a ginormous queue, absolutely round the block. So I was like, I just went to the queue, went to the front of the queue. I said, I should be on the guest list. Oh, yes, yeah, you're on the guest list, yeah. No problem. In you go. Walked in. Oh, yeah. There was kids break dancing, you know, at one part of the club. DJs were on. Oh, I'll tell you who was on that night doing a PA with a new release, Dougie Fresh, doing the show. So I stood at the end of the bar.
So that would, I think that would have been earlier than 86 then.
Yeah, probably so. I would have to check. Yeah, it could be 84, 85. It's a long time ago, Andy. Yeah, the grey cells are going. So stood at the end of the bar, and then out these guys came and went, oh, Jonathan, brilliant. We've told you we're here. We've been out a couple of times looking for you. Come backstage. Off I went backstage. There was people like Cool Herc. So I sat talking to him, and you couldn't write it. You know, it was just like, just the amazing night out. So, you know, I was there at this club till about 4 o'clock in the morning, saw Dougie Fresh do his PA. You know, there was loads of things going on. It was just like a really mad night. And so the following morning, they all get up. We all go down for breakfast. I said, "Oh, what did you know?" Because I asked them what if they wanted to go, and they all went, "Oh, no." So they said, "Did you go?" I said, "Yeah, I got in. Absolutely brilliant." You know, I said, you know, I told them everybody I met, and they were just like, "Oh, I wish we'd gone there." So the following day, they got to go to meetings. So I walked round Greenwich Village and did Vinyl Mania on Bleecker Street. There's a couple of other stores there, picked up some records. and then walked round to the Blue Note Club and happened to see that Gene Khan was playing there that night. So knocked on the door. And
Here we go again.
Yeah. Hey. There's a saying up here, shy burns get note.
Right. Okay.
So knocked on the door and said, I'm over from England. As it happened, the guy who opened the door, Gene Khan, was sound checking. So I went in, had a chat with him, met Jean, which was the first time I'd seen her. This was before she'd ever been over to England. Right. Met her, so I got on the guest list, went down that night. She was just absolutely electric. So I spoke to a few people, and the following night I got a table at the front, and I can't remember. Julian Sykes would have gone down from Island Records with me. I forget who else was with us that night. Might have been Pete Tong as well. We all sat down, and she did a slightly different set, some of the Philly stuff, and then some jazz standards, but absolutely dynamite. And then, of course, within a couple of years, she's over doing that New York Jazz Explosion in London that Byron Orme put on, and went over to see her there. So that was like another night out. And, every night I went to the Danceteria to see Danny and Jessica, who were the video DJs there, who I'd met previously because they'd come over to Rock City with a breakdancing crew.
Well, Mark Goddard says Dougie Fresh 1986, so I'll happily be corrected if that's the case.
Thank you, Mark.
So I'm going to rein you in ever so slightly because I want to bring it back. I want to bring it back to home turf. I want to continue to hear about the momentum that you've built now. Of course, we heard tales of the changing of the musical landscape in the UK. You mentioned then about hip hop, and you mentioned about the Def Jam tour and the emergence of the electro, breakdancing, and so on. That would be huge in Rock City as well. Didn't you used to do some all day on a Friday?
Well, you see, the Friday night
was the Young'uns used to go on a Friday or something.
No,
I remember reading in a book or something.
Yeah, there was what happened was that this is something else that happened at the club where Radio Trent had approached Paul at Rock City, Paul Mason, the then manager, to do like a kids' disco on a Saturday afternoon. So a Saturday afternoon, 12 till 4. So the Radio Trent DJs would come down and play all the commercial records. Well, of course, the crowd that used to come down on a Friday night had younger brothers and sisters that were into the music that was played on a Friday night, but obviously couldn't get in because they were underage. And we'd also got that emergence of breakdancing. So these radio DJs came down and touched upon some new releases from the States, but it was a little bit too commercial. And I would end up DJing before they came on and after they finished. And it became apparent to them that they were a little bit out of their depth with their music policy.
Credibility-wise as well.
No, I wasn't going to say that. So, it didn't take long before Radio Trent decided to bow out gracefully of Saturday lunchtimes, which then left an opportunity for me to further this musical landscape where I'd got a full-on breakdancing session going on from 12 till 4 every Saturday. I had another guy DJ'd with me, Master Scratch, Franklin, who I've got to give immense amount of props to because he's somebody that has stayed loyal to his music, never had the props that I think he fully deserves, and he worked alongside me on a Saturday. He was a real deck technician where he could cut records up, beat mix, far better than I could. I'll put my hand up to that. He was very, very good at what he did. And me and him would do Saturday dinner times, and there'd be 300-400 people in there. Lots of the bar was only soft drinks. There'd be parents bringing the kids down. The kids would have latest Sergio Tacchini tracksuits on, trying to work out how to do all these moves, breakdancing and body popping. And it was just, and there'd be challenges going on. There'd be other crews, and suddenly you'd have half a dozen crews in Nottingham that would come down to these sessions, and there'd be friendly battles that got a bit serious at times. And of course, with the emergence of the Rock City crew, which was something that was born out of Friday nights and Saturdays, that we had a breakdancing crew that
I didn't realise that Paulette's brother was the sister of one of those.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got Trix, who said hi already, was in that crew. Initially, I was involved with them. I gave up time in the week for them to rehearse when we hadn't got any bands on in the club. They got better and better. We worked out routines. There was quite a big pool of people, because we had people who could just body pop, others that could break dance, and then we had the guys who went to all days that were good footwork dancers. So they'd like into jazz, but they'd use intricate footwork to dance to jazz and some of the records that were played on the Friday night. So we had a pool of people that we kind of narrowed it down to. I think we had, Trix will tell you because he'll put it up in a minute. There was probably about 12 we got it down to, and then we narrowed it down again. And obviously some people were very disappointed that they didn't make the final cut. But, we couldn't have a breakdancing crew too big.
A huge troop.
Yes, exactly. So, we I put together what I thought was, not that I was any expert, far from it.
I was going to say, I've never heard you be referred to as the Malcolm McLaren of Nottingham, but you clearly are.
Far from it, no.
Jav Groove says hi. I also saw Dean Smith at some point liking the stream. Good evening. And we had Grant Nelson passing through earlier as well. So, hiya, my friend.
Oh, cool.
Big love to you.
Brilliant.
So we're deep in conversation. We've been happily conversing for well over an hour now. John and I are enjoying this. I'm aware that some people may not be able to stick with us for the full duration, but it is going to be recorded and you can come back and watch it any time. And of course, it's on our YouTube channel. And I say hi to John Smith as well. Good evening, sir. Okay, John. So in your own time, do continue.
Yeah. So we did, Saturday afternoons.
Let's get back to the evenings. Let's get back to the
right. Okay. So Saturday afternoons was running. Friday evenings was continuing. To grow. We involved. We sort of embraced, should I say, that electro sound that came through. Records like Hashim Al Nafish was an absolute anthem. A dance floor destroyer. From literally the very first time I played that, I think I went to the record store, bought it on a Wednesday or a Thursday, played it on the Friday night, and it was just like you'd lit the paper and the roof went off. It was just like you knew that this new sound was also going to be part of Friday nights, and those early electro records, and then the emergence of hip hop records with that electro feel were part of Friday nights as well, along with the funk and soul records. So you've got that a real mixture of music that was, all the one thing that the common denominator was, there were all new releases, and there was so many new 12s each week. You'd go and buy them, and some things would be given, they'd get played once or twice, and if by the second week they hadn't touched that dance floor and created a buzz, they were out the box, because there was another 30 new 12s had come in since we bought that needed playing, because there was so much stuff. We got through records like, the turnaround of records was just phenomenal, because there was so many records. I mean, I can tell you a story now that goes back to the jazz funk days, and I'm not proud of this, but it's an honest story. I remember going into Arcade Records to buy, this was before Rock City, when the All Dayers were at the Palais, and Kev played me this new record. Now, I bought this artist's first album. It was a jazz album. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Loved it. And then Kev had this white label, and he played it me. And I was just like, I didn't see it. I passed on it. And it's the one record that I can put my hand up and go, I made a massive mistake by not buying this record. And people on here will be quite shocked about this, because they would have thought, oh, well, he's bound to have had that quite early on. I ended up having to buy the album like a week later, because the 12s were just white labels, and then, there was none around. And that was Tom Brown, Funkin' for Jamaica. That was one thing that I put my hand up and go, got that record wrong, didn't I?
Well, in hindsight, well, it's crazy,
yes,
isn't it? Yeah.
But you just a snap decision on the day. I just didn't. Yeah, I listened to it, and it didn't register with me at that time.
Right, I get you. So let's
7 days later, I was kicking myself, but
with the album. So let's scroll forward. Yogi, I saw your comment. I'll come to that shortly. So let's move forward then to the electro sound, the hip hop sound, and so was there a marked difference between the Fridays and the Sundays? Was the Sundays a little bit more? Mind you, it was only monthly still on the Sunday at this point.
Yes, Sunday was monthly. So musically it wasn't out of step at all. It wasn't that one was doing this and the other one was doing that, because we'd started putting bands on as well. So obviously when we had acts on, depending on what the act was, to determine the flavour of the music, right? At the All Day, if it was a rap or hip hop act, not that would be the only thing that was played. There'd be slightly more of that style of music played, and also at the time, from this electro development of electro music, you had sort of like Hanson and Davis Tonight. Serious Intention, You Just Don't Know. There was these other records that were coming out of New York. And then I remember going in the store one day, and Kev had got some records that had come from Chicago.
Here we go, Yogi. This is going to answer your point. Carry on.
So I went in, and Kev had some records on Precision Records. I think there was a couple. One of them was by Grant, I think. And we started playing it, and we got a bit of a response on this. And there was also a record that came into Arcade, and that maybe had like one copy of it. And it was only years later that I realised the significance of this record, because Barbara Tucker did the vocals on it. At the time, Barbara Tucker was unknown to everybody, was Harlequin 4 Set It Off. Yeah. Now, Harlequin 4 Set It Off was a proper footwork record, and it was absolutely massive for me, as this Grant record was. And then, the next thing was there was other Precision records came in, And then the first few tracks records came in. I was straight away, they were already within that sound that we were playing. Went straight onto these records like there was no tomorrow. And they were ginormous records for me. This is way before the Hacienda. You know, these records were big records in Rock City. And I know that to be true because we put on an all-dayer and I had the Tracks tour on at Rock City. So I had Larry Heard, Frankie Knuckles was DJing, Marshall Jefferson, and I've got somewhere a good friend of mine. I don't have a leaflet or a poster for this. He kindly sent me a picture because he has, I think, a flyer or a poster in a frame in his office at work of this particular all-dayer. Now, years later, Radio 1 did an interview with Larry Heard in this Pioneers of House series. And I didn't know it had taken place. And a few years after it was done, somebody said, "Did you ever hear that Pioneers of House interview that Larry Heard did?" I went, "No." So they sent me, they burnt me a CDR of the interview that they did with Larry. And Larry said, we came over on this tour to the UK, and I think they did the Limelight in London at Shaftesbury Avenue, maybe on the Friday or the Saturday, and they did Rock City all day on the Sunday. And from how the conversation went on this interview, that, you know, Larry said, "Oh, we were there at Shaftesbury Avenue, and they didn't really get the music at all. There was no response whatsoever." Along came Rock City on the Sunday. It was sold out, 1,700 people in there. They went on stage, playing things like Washing Machine, Burning Down the House, you know, all the big Chicago records, all the early ones. And everybody knew the songs that were singing along with them. And he said, in this interview, he said, "I couldn't believe Rock City. They knew all our records." He said, "I now know what Michael Jackson feels like when he goes on stage." His words, not mine.
So when you listen back to that, you're just like, yes.
Well, no, not really. I mean, they made the records. So, you know, all we did is, hey, I can take no credit for those records whatsoever. I didn't make them. I didn't remix them. I just happened to have them. And I had a club where I could play them, and people responded to those records. There was other clubs around the country that maybe tried to play some of those records and didn't get a response, like the Limelight down in London. So, you know, it was right place, right time.
I think you've been way too modest. You've been way too modest. There's a lot of foundations that you laid down for those records to be so warmly received and appreciated by so many people in and around the, you know, Nottingham and the Midlands. So definitely you got to take a lot of credit for it, my friend.
Thank you.
There you go.
So
can I ask you one question before we continue? Have you got a light in that room that you could maybe click on? Because it's getting a little dark. I want to be able to see you a little bit better. There we go. Perfect. There you go.
It's got a nice shiny head now. A halo.
Yeah. There you go. If any people tell me, do they prefer it with or without the light? I'll let them decide. If they want it off, we'll turn it off. But it's nice to be able to see you a little better.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So so the emergence of the house scene and how that progressed, a whole new energy now. Well, I say a new energy. It's probably unfair to say new energy. Different energy.
Different energy, yeah. And you know, it was interesting because just before that all-dayer, we'd struggled with Friday nights because there was that transition period where you'd got that Nick Martinelli sound, you know, that, you know, slightly slower tempo, just as house was emerging, but there wasn't enough records to make a night of it. And the Friday nights had slipped down to about 600 people. And it was one of those things where I suppose in hindsight, if I'd have begged and pleaded to keep that night on, given another 6 months, we'd have seen in 6 months there was a lot of new music coming out, and that the scene changed again. I mean, Paul Mason at that time had then left Rock City. He'd gone to work at the Hacienda, and the Hacienda were starting to play, what we'd been playing at our all-dayers on club nights up there, and starting to get a bit of a result with those records. And of course, you suddenly had that emergence of the discovery of a drug, and Clubland changed again like that. Overnight, we had something that could fuel a whole different scene emerged. And
have you seen the book? Have you read the book by Matt Annis that talks about this whole period?
Yes, a bit, because Matt's just done the one book, has he?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I know bits about it because obviously he interviewed me for the book.
Well, he tells all about. He documents this perfectly, and we are going to be talking to Matt in a few weeks. So
that's
I'll throw forward
good thing to do, because how the landscape changed, and it was almost like the death of all dayers almost, because within 6 months the all dayer scene had gone.
Well, Colin talked about that. Neil talked about that. We spoke with Frenchie at length. So all of these stories run in tandem.
It was just,
and it paints the overall picture.
Yeah, it changed within 6 months from all dayers that were working, and this new scene just went 2 seconds.
No worries.
Went across the whole of the UK and turned Clubland upside down. So you've got new clubs emerging. All dayers weren't a thing anymore. The kids wanted to go out to, you'd got all these new clubs. You've got the Hacienda. Winston was doing what he was doing in Sheffield. And it changed. It changed. And I had, I made a decision then when we stopped doing Friday nights and stopped doing the all-dayers. I was then general manager at Rock City, and I could have left the club and continued DJing, but I decided to stay with the club that I loved and enjoyed working, and worked on, promoting the other nights. And, that scene, it changed. We had the emergence of other clubs in Nottingham that took on a different flavour in music. I remember, and Colin probably touched upon this, where Colin and I went down to do a weekender down at Bognor, and Nicky Holloway was there, and they were all talking about going over and putting something on at Ibiza, and starting something over there. And like Colin and I said, we were asked, as Colin I think mentioned in his interview.
Yeah, he said we can't get people to come out in Manchester.
Well, exactly. It was just for us. We were just like, there is no way at that time anybody in the north, would, would travel out of the country, you know, to listen to music and go on holiday. You know, it's just like you couldn't sell it. It was a non-start.
Let's try and get an overall picture then of the direction that things went for you, because I do have to say this every time we have these conversations. It's impossible to get document an exact life story down year by year, month by month. I'm sure that will come another time. Yourself talking with Colin, talking with Neil, talking with whoever. So let's push it forward then and say the next significant change with the decline of the All Dayers.
The change for me was I made a decision, and I don't really want to go into any detail on this because I don't feel I need to go down this route. I decided, and it wasn't myself, there was 5 people, we decided to hand our notices in at Rock City for reasons I don't want to go into. And we made that decision and we left the club not under a cloud of smoke, but some people knew the reasons for it, others didn't. You know, it was we decided to do it. I then
What year was that, John? Sorry, what year?
This would be looking now, probably 89. Spring of 89, I think this was. And I'd made that decision that, you know, I was going to walk away from the club. For my own sanity and keeping me out of any bad press or anything, I decided to go off to the States on another record buying trip with Dave. We flew into where did we go? Flew into New York, went to Philadelphia, then Pittsburgh, then caught the plane down to Dallas, and then drove down to New Orleans and did some record shops. So it was like trains, planes, and automobiles kind of thing, where we were on the road, you know, buying records at various stores for 2 weeks. But it got me away from anything that could happen in Nottingham. You know, I was out of the country. Nobody could say, you've caused this. No, I wasn't there, so it wasn't me. So, you know, I needed that break. I needed to clear my head and just step away from it. Mm-hmm. I came back, loads of great records to sell, put them into Arcade Records. I'd give them a pile of records. They'd sell them, give me some cash. And after a few weeks, Kev said, do you want to come and work full time as a buyer? Because I was still, you know, doing bits and bobs DJ, not a lot, but, you know, I still knew what was happening and what wasn't. So we were in West End Arcade. Within a year, we'd moved the shop up to Chapel Bar, at West End Arcade, then to Chapel Bar, opened the store there. So upstairs was all albums and CDs. And then downstairs, everybody used to come trundling down those stairs on a Saturday. You know, you could smoke in a record store, so there was like a big haze. And I was there, you know, I was a head buyer. I was given, you know, a complete free range on buying stock and selling it. And we were very fortunate in Nottingham because that emergence of that new scene, there was a lot of DJs coming through. So, you know, towards the end of the All Dayers, Graham Park was working in Selectadisc, another store in Nottingham, which was less than half a mile away from Arcade Records. Graham was working in there. Graham got the owner of that store, Brian Selby, also had the garage club, and Graham used to do Tuesday nights in there, and he would play a mixture of music for students. So it'd be the Smiths, you know, some indie stuff and a bit of rare groove, just a real mixture of records to the audience that were, you know, in front of him that night. And, you know, Graham had asked me on a few occasions, look, I really want to come and do an all-dayer. And, you know, we did book Graham for an all-dayer. And, you know, he came along and played at an all-dayer. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Then Graham obviously got the Saturday nights down there. Now, at that time, Selected's buying policy was always the cool student shop. So lots of cool indie records, you know, alternative stuff, but not known for buying house and garage and that sort of music, where Arcade Records always was. And in that tradition, I went to work there, was the buyer. So Graham would come and buy records off me, as would Alistair Whitehead, as would Angela Johnson, Angel, as would all the DIY DJs.
I was just about to say, I'm literally at the chapter in their book Dreaming in Yellow where they talk about the garage and how they got their ideas from going and seeing Graham playing. Brilliant book by Harry.
So all those people would come in, and I would then be the selector for them, where I would, you know, put tunes aside for them because I kind of knew what they all played.
The Pied Piper. You are the Pied Piper.
So, you know, they didn't just come to Arcade Records, as, you know, I would never expect anybody to just use one record store. You know, there was a bit of a pecking order there. It was very hard when you were getting limited promos of things to be able to give everybody, you know, the same records, you know. So some people got some things, other people didn't. Sometimes I was, you know, flavour of the month. Other times I was just like, why didn't you give me a copy of that? Well, I only had this many, you know. It was like one of those. So, you know, it was great. And, you know, there were people that would come from out of town to buy records, quite a lot of people would travel in. So Saturdays in the store, you know, I'd have sort of like 50 bags of records for 50 different DJs that I'd, you know, got ready with tunes that I thought they would want. We had a booth in the back of the shop where you'd got 2 decks, headphones on, where people could go and listen to those and then bring them back to the counter. You know, people would leave bags with me, so they would come in with loads of bags and I'd let them in the back for fear of things going missing. You know, there was a trust there, and people would come down and I'd sort them out records, and, you know, they'd go away and play them that night. And there was, you know, an awful lot of DJs, not just from Nottingham, that would come, all you know, around. Irregularly or regularly. Some people would come twice a week, other people would come once a week, and they'd go through the records. You know, if it was in the week where it's quiet, I'd play through the records for them over the system. And if it was on a Saturday, you know, you'd sometimes go play some record, and then 4 people go, oh, I'll have a copy of that if you've got one. And then 4 copies would go, and that was it. You know, it was just like a frenzy.
Ever any press? Did you ever do any press?
No, not really. I was just, you know, I was quite happy to work at the store. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was like, it really was a full-time job because you were on point, hunting records. You know, I was probably Greyhound Records, Arcade Records were Greyhound Records' biggest customer outside London, without a shadow of a doubt. You know, I'd have boxes of records arriving 5 days a week.
Did you get into? I'm not sure if you just said, because I am listening, but every now and again I think of something.
Yeah.
Were you doing mail order at this point?
No, we didn't do mail order. It was something that we thought about, because it was discussed about putting the shop's inventory on the internet in the early days. But mail order, no. We just hadn't got the time or the manpower to do it. It was just like, trying to put a list up of what records were available. It was at that time, I think for a lot of stores, it was more about, the experience of going to a store and hearing the records, and then looking in the racks and finding something that you didn't know from a few weeks ago that I thought you might not like, and then going, oh, actually, I quite like this. I'll buy that as well. Because, you can't get everybody's taste spot on. No. So, we had a lot of loyal customers.
Well, let me skip forward, because we could quite easily sit here talking about the nuances of a record store and the passion. A lot of people listening will remember those incredible days. So you say you're only DJing sporadically here and there. Do you ever wish that you would have pursued that? Did you ever have the desire to push yourself more nationally, or you've said you were happy and you'd found your niche behind the desk?
I found my niche. I suppose when I made that decision that hard decision to stop the all-dayers, and obviously Friday nights had finished, did I want to go and look for another club and then not have the safety net of a full-time job in a venue? Because it was, I was paid a wage for working at Rock City, and then I got a wage for doing Friday nights, and I got a wage for doing the all-dayers. So I was well looked after, and at the time, I suppose in hindsight, you could say, well, really, Jonathan, what you should have done is walked away from there and found another club. I'd been up to the Hacienda. Colin and I did an all-dayer at the Hacienda in its early days before Graham and Mike Pickering started, the Saturday nights. And this was when the DJ console was, if you were standing on the stage, there was like a little box to the left-hand side, which you went down some steps into, and all there was a slit like that you had to look out, and you could see the part of the dance floor. And that's the only bit of interaction. And we did this all day, and we were like, this is absolutely horrific, because we had to get out of the box and stand on the stage to see feel the atmosphere, because we were in this little box with a small viewing thing, and it was just like horrible, and I never went back. I think whoever put it on, that's the only one and only all day that did, because it just didn't work. The club didn't work. And then of course, when they started doing, Graham started working up there, they'd move the DJ console to upstairs on the balcony, so that you've got a vast opening so you could see everybody down on that dance floor. They'd put soundboards in, because it was all concrete and steel, soundboards in to dampen the sound to get it right. So it worked. But when we did that all day, it was horrible.
For you.
No, not at all. Well, Colin will say the same thing. It was just like, it just wasn't. So yeah, I was doing bits and bobs, odd sets in Nottingham. I went to was doing a bit of DJing in Leeds, but most Saturdays I went out to watch DJs play. But I was going to watch Americans play, so I'd go to James Bailey. Had got Venus in Nottingham, so I'd go down there, see some of the DJs playing there. Graham was at DJing in Nottingham, so I'd go down and see Graham some Saturday nights. Renaissance at Mansfield at Venue 44 had some American DJs on, so I'd go and see Roger Sanchez there, Dave Camacho. And early on, I remember that when you remember that big the big night that Steve Rains put on Bagley's in London.
Done at Hard Times, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Another place I used to go up to see Masters at Work play. And I went down to Hard Times in London and went down to see, because I knew Kenny and Louis. I was on speaking terms with them and Terry Hunter and a lot of the Americans, because I'd seen them here, there and everywhere. In fact, that night at Bagley's, I took rare groove albums down for Kenny and swapping them for new test presses and bits and bobs that he got that I wanted. So that was, already there was a relationship there with the American DJs, because I'd gone to see them, over the Midlands and the North, every Saturday night I was out, I was out clubbing, watching these people play, because wanting to hear those records. And wanting to hear, because they would have records that were going to come out in a few months' time, because, they'd come over with, it was all vinyl. It was, they'd have metal acetates with them. And, that's, it was feeding my quest for new music. And then, of course, out of the blue came a phone call from Alex Lowe's, wanted to know if I would come and go and work at this Southport Weekender. I didn't do, the first one was at Berwick. I didn't do that. But the second one, when he moved it over to Morecambe, he approached me about coming to work at the Weekender and DJ, which I did. And that then developed into a 27-year job of twice a year going to work for Alex, initially as a DJ on the roster, and then towards the end from DJ to being DJ and artist liaison, to then just purely being artist liaison and looking after all the DJs and the artists that would perform in the Powerhouse.
Stage manager.
Stage manager, yes, yeah. So, I was the go-to person. So, whoever was on, they knew who I was. And, likewise, part of that was also drawn in, where I would go to the music seminar, the Winter Music Seminar conferences in Miami, which is where, we all used to meet up, didn't we?
Indeed.
So, I went there.
Fantastic memories. I'm sure you've seen the video that I've pasted. I've posted of all of us over there.
Yes.
Crazy times. 97, 98.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, I was fortunate that, I went for 12 years on the trot. I think the first year I went, it was actually, everybody was at the Fontainebleau. So that's where everybody would meet up. There couldn't have been more than about half a dozen people from the UK were there that first time I went. Andy was there from Greyhound Records, Andy Marriott. He introduced me, to an awful lot of people over there that I didn't know, and I thank him to this day for doing that. It was a great person to know. And that also cemented a lot of lifelong friendships where, years later, I would go over to Chicago to the music seminar. They had 2 music seminars over in Chicago, and went over there and, had a fantastic time and was treated so well, by Georgie Porgy and Terry Hunter and Xavier, and everybody else over there, just had some amazing nights out with them in Miami and then in Chicago.
The Music Plant Boys. Yeah, the Music Plant Boys.
Oh, yes, yeah. And just had some crazy nights over there and crazy nights in Miami, doing 5 different clubs in one night, going to see everybody who was playing. It was a golden period of music, that was, where, house music had properly exploded and become of age. And, there was an awful lot of great records being put out by some fantastic people that were over there. And, getting to meet Joe Classell for the first time, doing a small bar in Miami, down on Ocean Drive at some small bar for the first time, just standing chatting with him, and bumping into so many people that I'd read about but never had the chance to talk to or even see play, and going to see Danny Tenaglia play in a very small club, doing like a 10-hour set to 300 people, and sitting in the back of that with Kenny and Louie and just talking, just regular guys having a night out.
Well, I listened to you telling these tales. Yogi's been very...
busy.
It's been very busy. No, it's great. We love it. We love the interaction. He asked a question. Let me just put my glasses back on, because I realised today I can't see shit without them. I know the answer to this, I believe, out of your lips. What do you think of the American invasion? Bearing in mind the first Berwick Morecambe gigs were all British DJs, do you believe the American thing and the wages they demand had been detrimental to the scene? I think I know what your answer is to that.
I don't think it was detrimental to the scene. I think they had a lot to offer when they came over, and we were bringing DJs were coming over that were playing records from they had records that we didn't have over here, and I think I understand why Yogi's asked this question, and it's a very hard for me to answer this, because yes, we needed them over here because that was where the source of the music was coming from. So why wouldn't we? Regarding the wages, well, all I can say on that is that if you're a promoter and you're prepared to pay that money and pay more each time, then you've fueled the fire. So if somebody's getting paid or whatever, they've got to be worth that, because somebody must think they are worth that. So we
made the rod for our own backs, didn't we?
Yeah, I think a lot of promoters at that time made an awful lot of money and paid those DJs a lot of money. So who's wrong? Who's right?
Indeed.
It is what it is. And, I think, I got to see those people play over here and play over there. I think we all learnt a lot from them, and we're all very grateful and thankful for those people, those DJs coming over and plying their trade over here and, furthering the music that we all love.
It added another level, another dimension. It definitely added another dimension to
because
the sound.
They all play slightly differently. They don't all play. I mean, back in the early Southports where you'd have American DJs on, you'd always go home with 5 or 6 records that they would be the tunes that you'd remember that weekend before, and whether they were available or not, they were on your shopping list or in your head. You'd be humming them on the way home in the car. You're a DJ, you were like, right, you were on the case trying to find out when promos were done of these records, or, when they're going to be released, that you could get them to play. So, it fueled a fire, and it's part of the scene,
It was a huge part of the scene. So, listen, we've been talking for 2 hours almost. Can you believe that?
Yeah, we are.
The only reason I can ask you this is because I'm aware of it. I shouldn't really direct the questions, but I want to try and get a few of the key parts of your story down, because I do know at some point you were then working in a pressing plant. So tell us how that came about.
That came about when I'd been approached probably early 1999 by Chris King. Chris was an old friend of mine. Chris was also a Northern Soul DJ. He was instrumental in putting the band KWS together, which obviously, Neil released that version of Please Don't Go and was a massive hit for Chris, KWS, and Neil. Chris had got this pressing plant called Independent Pressing in Nottingham. He approached me at the record store a couple of times. The first time, I was happy at the store, didn't want to go. Then the situation changed within a few months because we'd seen what was happening now with the demise of the sales of vinyl records and new technology coming out. People then, using CDs, burning CDs, and we were finding that selling records without an online presence, which we touched upon earlier on, where, in the early days of the store, it wasn't needed, but certainly the latter end of the store, I felt that we were missing a trick that we could sell. Certainly CDs from upstairs, we could sell an awful lot of music online if we had that presence. The decision was made not to, and with dwindling sales and people starting to download tracks now, we were seeing the demise of record stores in this country. And 88 and 89, they were the start of it. And sadly, Arcade Records closed late 1999. I got offered the job. Chris then approached me again about working at the pressing plant. And I went down and I started working there. I knew nothing about the manufacturing record. I was totally, it was another string to my bow to learn. I was keen to learn the process of how, you make a record, because I didn't know. I hadn't got a clue. And to go in and somebody turn up where they've been in the studio, they've got a DAT tape of a track that they've mixed. Chris would put it onto his desk in the studio, listen to it, and advise them that this level's too high, that needs sorting out. He would tweak them if he could. Then the process would be he would then cut a 14-inch lacquer, and the record would be transposed from that tape using a lathe onto a 14-inch lacquer. Then that would be sent over to the galvanics department, and they would grow stampers from this using the electrolysis process. Those stampers would then be moulded, put onto a press, and then using small pellets of plastic heated up into the size of a hockey puck, which is about that size, then put onto a pressing machine. Heat went down, the vinyl, that plastic was spread out because the grooves on the plates were pointing up. So then when it's pressed onto the vinyl, you've got the grooves like this, which obviously the needle vibrates and makes the sound that you hear on a record. So I learned all of that. I hadn't a clue.
I feel like I'm on a BBC Three documentary. I love it.
Yeah, everybody's falling asleep now. You've asked that question, aren't they?
Nice,
so,
right.
Yeah, I worked there, and we had some very big clients. We were the plant was working, 6 days a week.
And exclusive records was run from there as well, right?
Yes, yeah, that was Chris's label. So, we went over to the States and did the deal to bring DJ Duke, Blow Your Whistle, over, and that was signed to FFRR, to Pete Tong's label. You know, on that trip, we signed a few records. You know, we went to see a few people over there and did deals to release records on the label. And then Chris had also get people to record tracks for him to put out. So yeah, that was all part of that. I went over to New York with Chris. In fact, one year we went over to New York to do some deals, and then went straight to Miami afterwards to the music festival. So you know, we had some good times. But the pressing plant was great. It was another chapter in understanding how records were made. You know, and I used to take, you know, records home to test that they'd been pressed correctly, because obviously you have to test everything you play. You can't suddenly just press the record and think, well, that'll be all right without listening to it, because if you're making 5,000 records, you don't want to be making 5,000 records that are wrong. So yeah, that was an enjoyable time, and that yet again was something that, you know, with the demise of record stores, you saw the demise of, you know, the pressing
demand, yeah,
decrease. So from people going, I'll have 2,000 copies of this, it turned into, well, can you do me 1,000 or 500? Yes, we can, but then you need more jobs to keep the plant running. And you know, it was a sad day when, you know, 6 years later, the plant had to close because it just wasn't viable. We just weren't making any money. You know, it was heartbreaking to see. And then, of course, now you've got this situation where vinyl's on the increase again. And, you know, there's a lot of plants that have fallen by the wayside. And people now say, you know, oh, we have to wait ages for our records and really wish that independent pressing was still there. Well, you can't run something at a loss for 10 years on the off chance, or 10 or 15 years on the off chance it might come back.
It's going to come back again.
Yes.
Okay, so let's try and between then and now, obviously so much has gone on in between in those 15 years or so. Any key moments, or do we want to get to the part where you're at now?
Key moments for me, I think, was Alex giving me that opportunity to work at Southport, without a shadow of a doubt. That was, for me, another game changer, because you'd still got the rave thing had settled down. You'd got the American DJs coming over now. You'd got, you know, nights around the country that were playing house music and booking American DJs. You know, the explosion had happened. And for Alex to put, you know, his money where his mouth was. I mean, people forget that those first 3 weekenders, Alex really, you know, almost went bankrupt. You know, he put all his money into his heart and soul, everything, you know, and, you know, he lost money and went again, lost money and went again. And then finally, you know, what he believed in started to work and pay dividends. And for anybody who went to the weekenders, anybody says, I went there and it was rubbish. You can't have gone to where we went because, you know, through those different venues, and then when we finally settled at Ainsdale, at Pontins at Ainsdale, that was like, it was like you were going twice a year to church, to sacred ground.
Hallelujah.
That was just like where you'd meet people that you'd only see twice a year, and you then end up being lifelong friends. And I'm sure everybody will say the same thing, that they went there, you know, whether you were lucky to do all of the weekenders or half of the weekenders or 5 of the weekenders or some of them every now and again, it was a place you had to go to for the love of music. And it really was just an amazing atmosphere and such a friendly crowd. Very rarely did I see any trouble, very rarely. It was just like-minded people that just loved the music. And
well, it was
I've
something.
got to say that it's just, it was just an amazing time all through those years.
And seeing definitely. Sorry.
Sorry.
I really don't mean to talk over you. There's just a tiny bit of a delay. It is most definitely, again, you talk about the early days of Rock City. Southport Weekender was a life-affirming, life-changing situation. There was so much more to it than it just being a music event, and I'm sure everybody watching this will agree with me when I say that. I had the pleasure of you introducing me on the stage on more than one occasion when I was playing there. Absolutely changed my life. And it's the foundations, the blueprint that many of us as promoters based our own events on down the year. That was the yardstick that you would only ever dream of getting somewhere a tenth of a percentage of anywhere close to doing what Alex did, yourself did, what Dave did. Of course, we can't mention Southport without mentioning Dave.
That's right.
So absolutely incredible. And then that would continue. At Southport, you would meet a gentleman that you're working closely with now. Do you want to tell us about how that relationship blossomed?
Yeah, well, you see, my now boss, John Adamson, I met John through... John had booked Graham Park to do To the Manor Born. Now, to people who've never been, this autumn, it'll be the 30th anniversary of the very first To the Manor Born. And 30 years ago this October, John decided to put this night on in his dad's hotel, back room of his dad's hotel, because he liked the music. He'd been clubbing all over the place and wanted to do this Sunday night to bring, house music to the northeast, and put this event on a Sunday night. So I first met John. I'd gone up with Graham, lived in Nottingham. Graham was booked to do it. I can't remember, and I would have to ask Graham, and I bet it would be the same. I can't remember whether it was the first night the Manor Born was on that I went up with Graham, or whether it was the second or the third night when John had booked him that I went up. So I went up with Graham because at that time I was working at the record store, and Mondays was always a dead day. Very few people come in the store. All I do is place orders on the phone. So I had Mondays off and then work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I said to Graham, yeah, I'll come up with you. So I met John for the first time, and we've remained lifelong friends through all my different jobs that I've had. Always been in touch with John. Then when there was a change of DJs up at the Manor Born, and John and Alex needed somebody to do the soul room at the Manor Born on a Sunday, I was asked, would I like to come up once a month on a Sunday and DJ in the back room, the Manor Born. So I did it for many, many years, doing the back room once a month. So there'd be 12 Sundays a year, and then we'd also do some bigger ones on bank holidays, and I would go up and do them, and had some amazing times up there. That's where I met my now wife. She was working there for John. John and I, when the Manor Born finished, we still kept in touch. And it was really ironic that John had rung me about doing a Manor Born revival night at one Christmas, probably about maybe 14, 15 years ago, So it would have been the 15th anniversary, something like that. After we'd finished doing the Sundays, he wanted to do this one on Boxing Day. So, he said, what do you think? Do you think people are going? I said, yeah, definitely. I said, still loads of people talk about it. I think, you definitely should do it. And then, later on in that conversation, he was like, actually, he said, well, we were just talking. I'll put this in further. We're just talking. I said, my wife and I have just bought, because John came to our wedding. I said, my wife and I have just bought a house in Darlington. I'm looking to relocate. I'm currently looking for a job up in the northeast. And he went, you're just the person I want. I'm thinking of putting a music festival on in the grounds of Hardwick Hall Hotel. Will you come up and have an interview? I said, I'd love to. He said, when you next up? I said, well, a couple of weeks' time on a Saturday, I'll be up. He said, right, we'll meet up. Come and meet me at the hotel. So I met him at the hotel, and within a month, I was working for John full time as event organizer for Hardwick Festival, and some of the two of the larger corporate events that he puts on at the hotel, the Oyster Festival and the Lobster Charity Ball. I get involved with those, and I've worked for John for the last 13 years now. Great boss to work for.
The transformation of that venue itself, I mean, that's a whole other story, but just from the beginnings of Hardwick Hall, from how it used to be in that tiny little back room to the monster that it's become now. It's a shame. John Adamson is definitely not a person I could get sat here having this conversation with me. Neither is Andrew Marriott, who's just come on and said hello to you. I've asked him.
Hi, Andy.
I know he's got tales for days, and he's declined. It's quite funny how shy some people are, when you ask them to come and talk in front of the camera and share their stories, because all of these people, to say unsung heroes is probably is disrespectful, because everybody on the scene knows the importance that many of these people had on the scene. I myself, working very closely with Andrew, buying records off him later on as producing, getting to know him as well. And he's saying between 89 and 97, you and he used to talk every single day. So it's great. That's right. His ears must have been burning. We were talking about you earlier, bro. So, yes, Hardwick Hall, 30 years, did you say?
30 years this autumn, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Incredible. We're trying to... how many people are there? Attendees?
Well, we regularly have it, so you've got like 1,000 people on a Sunday night.
No, now this year, I mean, because it's huge.
Oh, for the festival?
Yeah.
Oh, right. The Hardwick Festival it has a capacity of 10,000. So, we've got this on the 20th and 21st of August. We've got the main stage, which we have, a host of different acts on. So, we've got Jake Bug, who's from Clifton in Nottingham, performing Stereophonics, C6 Steve. We've got the specials on Sunday, Becky Hill, Ella Eyre, Proclaimers. We've also got some new up-and-coming bands and artists from the Northeast. We do an introducing stage for, nurturing new talent. We've also got three areas where we've got DJs performing. We've got this year, we've got Danny Tenaglia, Ariel Free from Radio 1, Purple Disco Machine, Jeremy Healy.
I'm going to stop you there. Because we're
Ricky Morris.
Oh, John, listen, that's incredible. So, 2 hours.
We've got Inner City Live. We've got Robin Est performing as well.
Time out. Oh. Go to Hardwick Hall Festival. So listen, I am going to start to wrap this up now, because we've we've
It's
engaged
dark where you
people.
are now. Look.
It's pitch black. 2 hours and 15 minutes into the conversation, we've engaged people for so long, and I know that people are saying, no, carry on. But I say this to all of my guests when we finish talking. There is going to be an occasion for yourself to come on and talk alongside other legends in the game, people that we've spoken to in the past, people that we will continue to talk about and talk to. You mentioned Alistair Whitehead. I'll be talking to someone like Tom Wainwright. They'll be telling us about their part in the story that's interwoven into all of those years. But I think we've done a great job in putting your story down. Is that the first time that you've ever told the story in such detail? Am I the first, or have you told that many times before?
Well, I had an interview with. I've done a couple of interviews before. Obviously, Matt's done, as we touched upon earlier on, Matt for his book. I've also done another interview for another book that was put out some years back. But this is the first time it's been done live, unscripted,
well,
over the
natural.
internet.
That's how I like to do it. That's how I like to do it. It's because it's raw, it's real, and I guarantee that you're going to go away and you're going to go, oh shit, I didn't mention this, that, and the other. But we can do more. We'll do more.
It's a snapshot. It's a snapshot in time of, all those years. And we could go back and delve into, me travelling around doing Northern Soul gigs and going to all-nighters and all-dayers over that period from 76 to 80. We could do 70, 77 to the
I'm
early.
going to stop you because you're going to carry on. You're going to carry on again. I'm going to stop you because you're going to carry on again. So listen,
we can have a part two. If people
most definitely.
We can do one where people just fire questions, whatever.
Well, I'm going to do. There'll be a panel. We'll have like 3 or 4 of you guys. You're a very humble person. You, as I did say earlier, you are very, very instrumental. A lot of people owe a lot to you, and you are held in high esteem by anybody that knows you, my friend. So I am truly honoured for you to give me your time this evening, and I will bid you farewell now. And it won't be too long before you're back on, and we're talking to.
No, I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and I'd like to thank everybody who's took time out tonight to listen to it and put questions up. Maybe we haven't answered them all, but thank you everybody. And hi to everybody who knows me from wherever and whenever. Great to know that you've tuned in and passed comment.
Wonderful. Well, Paulette has been here from start to finish. She's saying it's an awesome interview and great memories. Peter Warrior says he's loved it. Who was it said... Jeremy Suddard said, you also cook a mean chalet breakfast.
Yes, that's right. But we won't mention it. But we won't mention Jez's potatoes.
Okay, let's not. Right, John, I'm going to say a few goodbyes to everybody, and I'll send you a link where you can come and check this back. Okay,
Brilliant.
my friend.
Thanks, Andy. You take care. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wow, incredible. Absolutely incredible. Mr. Marriott, be sure to listen back. You do get a big mention talking about the days. Why is it so bright in here now? Turn that off. Sorry. Let me get off. Come off. Get off. Don't want that. It's in my face. That's gone. Mr. Marriott. Yogi, definitely you and I will be talking, my friend. I'm sure you wouldn't mind coming and joining me at some point. Can I turn that up? That's a little bit better. Rob, how are you, sir? Great to see you recently. Nice for us to give a mention to Southport there. And dinosaur eggs. Okay, that's obviously like a private joke. You may be watching this on my own profile, on my regular Andy Ward profile. I do have a dedicated page. It's called Inspire and Be Inspired. Now, depending on where you've been watching, you may have had one person watching with you. You may have had a whole heap more. We also go live on YouTube. This will be available to watch again on my wall. It's also available to watch again on my YouTube channel, and it's available as an audio only podcast. I do these every week. We've had some incredible conversations over the last few months. You heard me mention tonight a talk with Colin Curtis and Neil Rushton. We had a talk with Frenchie talking about the Birmingham scene, local jazz dancers, other DJs. A few weeks ago, we spoke to the guys who were at the forefront of the bleep and bass sound. That was Winston Hazel and Edsy. Forge Masters, Unique 3, so many. If you look on Inspire and Be Inspired, the link is coming across the page there. You can see a whole heap of conversations. Please do go and check them out. We've got some really, really interesting topics. And we also delve every now and again into topics that have got nothing to do with music. We've been talking about mental health. We've been talking about ladies, moving into different times of their lives, dealing with situations that throws up. So many. Next week at 6 o'clock UK time, I am going to be talking to Kareen Griffith, and we are discussing music and mindfulness and how it can be an aid to your mental health. It won't be a lengthy conversation like tonight has been, but it's definitely going to be interesting indeed. You can see one or two people here who have liked the video on the Inspire and Be Inspired page. Also, thank you to Jeff for following the page, and everyone else that's been commenting. It's truly, truly appreciated. Or you guys coming back and watching the recording as well. Please do leave a comment and let us know that you enjoyed that. I'm sure Jonathan would be excited to know you were listening to his stories. That is me saying goodbye for now. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you another time. Don't forget, please go over and like the Inspire and Be Inspired page. Subscribe to me on YouTube, yada, yada, yada. Thanks, guys. Take care now.